This happened to me about 6 years ago. I was doing my usual routine of walking around town for a few hours as I enjoyed walking and I was getting my steps in for the day. I'd always start from my house, walk around town for a few hours and turn around and head back home. I'd always go walking around noon or an hour or two later at the latest. My walks would start at 11 AM at the earliest or 2 PM at the latest. This day in particular had a bunch of things to do, so I was unable to go out walking before noon. I'd eventually finished everything that I needed to do, but I was already in the mid to late afternoon. I checked the time and it was almost 3 PM. I debated whether or not if I should go walking or if I should go tomorrow since I had nothing going on the next day. I said, fuck it, and decided to go for my walk, but I told myself that I had to cut it short since I didn't want to be out after sunset since it would get pretty cold at night. I got dressed and headed out to get my walk in for the day. Fast forward almost 3 hours later, I looked at my phone to check the time and saw that it was almost 6 PM and started to make my way back home. I had a bit of a problem, which was I was 6 miles away from my house and it would take me about an hour and a half or more to get there. The sun had fully gone down and there was only a faint orange glow in the sky from it. The night sky had begun to take over and the air was turning cold. I began to make my way home and had picked up the pace as I didn't want to be outside when it was cold. I was about 2 miles away from my home and thought I was in the clear when I was wrong. I passed by a convenience store when I noticed a man sitting on the side of the building smoking a cigarette. The man looked to be in his early to mid-30s, wore a black hoodie, black pants and black shoes. I saw him turn his head towards me and he gave me a blank stare. I thought nothing of it and just ignored it. I turned around a few moments later and saw he had gotten up from his sport and began walking in the same direction I was going. I kept checking behind me often to see if he would turn down another street, but he never did. After several minutes of him walking the same way as me, I hear the man start yelling, "Hey!" He then started to see other stuff trying to get my attention, which I ignored. Right after that, I heard him yell, "What the fuck?" at me in an angry tone. I sped up and didn't dare to look back at that point. I texted my dad and explained that there's some creepy guy following me and how he was yelling at me. My dad replies and asks me how far I am and I say about less than a mile away. He replies back to that, "Keep walking, don't worry, and that he'll come get me in the next few minutes." I turned behind me to see if he was still following me as he stopped yelling. And he was, unfortunately. I was 3/4 of a mile away from my house and thought about just running there. At the same time, I didn't want this guy to follow me and find out where I lived. I was about to turn down the street I lived at when something told me not to. I texted my dad and told him I passed the street and to go the other way, which he replied with, "Okay." I kept going forward passing the street when all of a sudden I hear some sort of frantic noise. I turned around only to see to my horror that this guy had put his hood up and was sprinting straight towards me. Without hesitation, I boarded straight ahead and ran across the street. I kept running for what felt like hours until I saw a pair of headlights coming down the street. I waved my arms like a madman hoping they would see me. Thankfully, they did, and the car stopped. I got closer and I saw it was my dad. I looked behind me only to see that the man who was chasing me had somehow disappeared. I got in the car and explained everything to him. He said that he was going to drive down the street to see if he could find the man and would confront him. We drove down the street only to see nobody walking on the sidewalk or behind the bushes. There was no sign of anyone being out as the streets were empty. From that day on, I never go out walking after 2 PM. And since then, I carry a pocket knife with me whenever I go out walking for my own safety and protection. I don't know what that man would have done to me had he caught me, and I don't think I ever want to know. The three of us were basically inseparable growing up. Because of our ages being so close together and the fact that we were all girls under the same household. Old-fashioned favoring the boys who can do no wrong was a common experience for us. We were thick as thieves as a result of this, and we rarely went out without one another when it came to going out to play. Our home was across from the elementary school we all attended, and sometimes we'd play there when the school was closed. This was a time before schools were constantly locked up. But other times we'd walk to nearby parks to play, since this was also a time where you could go almost anywhere unsupervised. And if you had a more neglectful family, and especially so. The park wasn't too far from where we lived, so it was a quick walk for all of us. Worth the time it took to be able to climb on the playset and enjoy the park's other recreational objects. I don't remember what we were talking about at the time, but we weren't far from the park when this person in a car pulled up to us. None of us had seen her before, so when she claimed to know our grandma, it threw us off. She said she lived not far from us and offered us a ride home, but in our guts I think we all realized something wasn't quite right, despite not being the most socially aware kids. We refused, but despite the refusal she kept insisting, saying that our grandma was worried about us, that she needed us home and all that. We continued to say no to her, and despite continuing to ask, we could hear the growing frustration in her voice. I don't remember too much from here, but the school was right behind us, as it was a fairly big school, with multiple sections and buildings spanning behind a metal fence. We all knew we needed to get away from her somehow, so we started keeping an eye out for something that would help us put some distance between us and her. And what popped up? A gate to the school, practically indistinguishable from the fencing aside from the hinges and some metal chains used when they would actually lock it. And thankfully for us, it wasn't one of those times. We opened the gate as quickly as possible and ran inside, slamming it behind us in case she decided to give chase, and ran as fast as we could across school grounds. We only stopped when we were on the opposite side of the school and hid in the school bathrooms as we waited patiently, and fearfully, to see if she had followed us. It felt like hours before we felt it was safe enough for us to come out, and yeah, it was probably 20 minutes at the most. Eventually, we got up the nerve to peek out of our stool, just to be sure she wasn't quietly waiting for us to show ourselves. And a huge wave of relief came over us when we saw the completely empty bathroom before us. Before long, we decided heading home was the best option for us, since we didn't need that lady showing up again. We were a bit upset about not having gone to play in the park like we planned, but that wasn't something that some video games and snacks couldn't fix. I honestly wonder at the time if we had truly comprehended the situation we had been in, but as kids I suppose we didn't think about it too much, never even telling our moms or anyone else in the family about our experience. I'd also only realized recently that she had offered us a ride home, and yet her car was going in the opposite direction of our house, towards the park we were heading to. So she would have had to make a U-turn on the street where U-turns were illegal. And I doubt she would risk getting in trouble with the law just to get us home because our grandma was worried. Some details are a bit fuzzy, as I'm an adult now, and it was a long time ago. But this memory has been in my head all these years, and despite the love of my life confirming this was not a normal experience, I can't help but feel like I was truly misreading the situation. Thank you for taking the time to read my post, and everyone have a good day/night, and stay safe.